All right, today we're going to tackle a really big topic, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It's the largest anti-hunger program here in the U.S., and you might know it by its old name, the Food Stamp Program.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the basics, what SNAP is all about. Then we'll walk through who's eligible and how benefits are actually calculated. After that, we'll look at how people use those benefits in the real world. And finally, we'll zoom out to see the bigger picture.
All right, first things first. What is SNAP really all about? What is its core mission?
You know, it's this massive federal program, right? But at its heart, the goal is actually super straightforward. Let's dig in.
And that word, supplemental, it's really the key to the whole thing. This program isn't meant to cover your entire grocery bill. The goal is to supplement, to help bridge the gap so that low-income families can afford a healthy, decent diet.
And get this, the sheer scale of this program is just wow. We're talking 41.7 million people every single month. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 1 in every 8 Americans receiving this help.
And, of course, to support that many people, you're looking at some serious federal dollars, over $100 billion for fiscal year 2024. But here's the important part. Where does that money actually go? Well, the vast majority, like 93 cents of every dollar, goes directly to households as benefits.
So, what does that break down to for an individual? On average, it's about $187 a month. That's the real-world cash that helps put food on the table.
Okay, so we've got millions of people and billions of dollars in play. The big question then becomes, who actually gets these benefits? How is that decided?
So think of it like this. There are basically 2 main paths to get SNAP benefits. You've got the traditional route, which is a deep dive into your finances. And then there's this other path, categorical eligibility, which is kind of a fast track for folks already in other aid programs.
So, for most people going that traditional route, you've got to pass 3 financial tests. First up is the gross income test. That's your total income before any deductions. Pass that, then comes the net income test, which accounts for things like rent and childcare. And finally, for some, there's an asset test, which looks at things like cash you have in the bank.
But it's not just about the numbers. There are also some really important non-financial rules, especially around work. For most able-bodied adults, that means things like registering for work or taking a suitable job if it's offered. But, and this is a big but, there are a lot of exemptions. We're talking about kids, seniors, people with disabilities. They don't fall under these same requirements.
Okay, so let's say a household has jumped through all the hoops and they're eligible. How does the system figure out the exact dollar amount they'll get each month?
Well, it all comes down to a pretty straightforward formula. The government starts with a maximum possible benefit for a household of a certain size. Then, they subtract what the household is expected to contribute on their own, which is always 30% of their net income. What's left over? That's your monthly benefit.
Let's make this real with an example. Check this out. For this hypothetical 3-person family, the max benefit is $785. Okay, their net income is $400. So 30% of that is $120. That's their expected contribution. You just subtract that $120 from the $785, and bam, their monthly SNAP benefit is $665. Simple as that.
All right, so the family's approved, the benefit amount is set. Now for the practical part. How do they actually go out and buy food with it? Yeah, if you're picturing old-school paper food stamps, think again. Those are long gone. Today, it all happens with an electronic benefit transfer card, an EBT card. It works just like a debit card at the grocery store, which makes the whole process way simpler and a lot more discreet.
Now, you can't just buy anything with this card. There are some really specific rules. The whole point is to buy food to prepare at home. You know, staples like bread, fruit, vegetables, meat. But it absolutely cannot be used for things like alcohol, cigarettes, vitamins, or hot, ready-to-eat foods from the deli counter.
So where is all this money being spent? Well, no big surprise, superstores and supermarkets are the big players, making up almost 3/4 of all spending. But here's what I think is really interesting. That slice for internet retailers, it's already over 10%. That tells you that SNAP families are a growing part of that whole online grocery trend.
Okay, for our last section, let's pull back and look at the bigger picture. Because with a program this huge, you're always going to have conversations about things like fraud and integrity. So let's talk about one of the main concerns.
Yeah, one of the most serious issues you'll hear about is something called trafficking. And in the world of SNAP, this term has a very specific definition. It means illegally trading your food benefits for cash, usually for less than what they're worth. It's a type of fraud that really gets at the heart of the program's purpose. Now, while trafficking is absolutely a crime and the USDA takes it very seriously, it's also important to look at the data to understand how widespread it is. According to the government's own research, the rate of this kind of retailer trafficking is estimated to be about 1.6% of all the benefits that go out.
And all of this really leads us to one big final question about the future, right? Policies change, technology is always evolving, food prices go up and down. So the real challenge for SNAP is how will it adapt? How will it continue to meet the nutritional needs of millions of Americans in a world that's constantly in flux?